I'm told that the derivation of the word sin, to commit a crime, is to miss the mark. So let's explore that and how that makes sense. So the mark. To hit the bullseye means to survive. An archer aims at the bullseye, aims at the mark. A hunter aims at the prey, aims at the mark. A sports person aims for the goal, aims for the mark. And each of us, throughout our lives, aims for the mark. Now, the mark is the symbol, right? The bullseye is the symbol of survival, of success, of sustainability, security. It's hard to reach to the higher human needs of love and belonging, self-esteem, developing our gifts, bringing those gifts abundantly into the world. It's hard to reach for the higher human needs if we're dead, if we've failed to hit the mark. Now, there's a good reason that targets, that representations of the mark, because that's what a target is, right? It's a representation of the mark, are round, because it doesn't matter if you're a hunter shooting a deer or are a sports person throwing a ball. It doesn't matter if you're 2 inches to the left or 2 inches to the right. It doesn't matter if you're 2 inches below or 2 inches above. If you miss the mark, you fail. Your family goes hungry that day. You die, right? If you set off across the desert and you miss the oasis by 3 degrees, your compass was a little off, or you weren't holding it right in front of you. And so that little gap between the needle and the bottom of the compass looked a little differently. You missed it by just 1 degree. Well, if you're traveling 100 miles a day in the desert, you just miss it by 1 degree. You just miss it by 1 mile. But if you miss the oasis by a single mile, you don't get water. You don't survive. You missed the mark. Right? If the oasis was 100 miles away and you got tired at 98 miles, you're 2 miles away from the mark. You die of dehydration, right? If you give up 2 miles away from the mark, you die, right? So to sin is to miss the mark. Today, suicide is a sin, right? It's actually a crime. It's illegal, right? If you commit suicide, they'll come to your house the next day and arrest you for being dead because you missed the mark, right? You were supposed to figure out how to survive. You were supposed to live a good life. That's the mark, to live a good life. You missed the mark in some way. You set out with a goal. You were going to lose 5 pounds. That was the mark. A month later, you weigh 2 pounds more. You missed the mark, right? So the mark is in the center, right? It's an ideal. It's a conception, right? Every human being in the history of humanity has wanted to feel sustainably better, sensorily, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, energetically. We all want to feel good, sustainably, consciously, self-reliantly, independently. We want to feel good, and we don't want to feel bad. We want to feel good, we don't want to feel bad. And the mark, the center point, is the representation of the next step in that journey. It's not a destination, it's a journey. There is an infinite continuum of sustainable well-being. And what that means is that wherever we are on the continuum, it's easy to use things like money, and we have the delusion that more and more money makes us happier. But if we look at the target, if we look at the mark, we understand that you can have too much money and you can have too little money, right? Too much money is up here. Too little money is down here. You can miss the mark moving too far to the left or too far to the right. You can be too perfectionistic and miss the mark, meaning your sustainable well-being will deteriorate if you move too far to any extreme. Too far to the right, you miss the mark. Too far to the left, you miss the mark. Too high, you miss the mark. Too low, you miss the mark. You can be too attached to things. And you can be too apathetic. You can miss the mark around anything that is pointed to at the mark. You can be too in love, and too in hate, and too in apathy. Too, I'm not interested in other people. And the mark is the direction towards sustainable well-being. If you're hungry and your family is waiting at home, and you're the breadwinner, in this case, the hunter, right? And you're taking aim. If you don't account for the wind, if you don't account for gravity, the arrow's going to fall. You've got to raise it up a little bit so that it'll fall. If you don't know the tautness of your bow, then as you let go, you're going to scare the prey. You're going to miss the mark, and you're going to alert the mark that it's being hunted, which means that the next arrow may be 3, 5, 10 times more difficult than the first arrow. If you fail the first time, if you miss the mark, your next shot is likely to be more difficult. Not at a target, but if you're aiming at a rabbit, if you're aiming at a buffalo, it's not going to just watch the arrow, graze past, or if you hit an insignificant portion, right? If you go into the bit of a haunch of the buffalo and you didn't blind it, you didn't kill it, you've just given a lot of motivation to get away from you, right? So off it runs. You've missed the mark. And you've made it worse because now your prey is doing everything that it can to avoid you, to avoid being shot at again, to survive. So the continual path on well-being is like stepping stones. And it's important to understand this continuum of well-being. Because if you're here, then these two steps are backwards. They're going backwards. But if you're down here, these two steps are going forward, right? If you weigh 400 pounds and your doctor is telling you you've missed the mark by 200 pounds, right? You've missed the mark. Your optimum well-being, the amount of pain on the nerves of your joints, for example, is twice what it should be. Because you weigh 200 pounds more than those joints were optimally designed, right? When genetics designed hip joints, it was designing them for 120 to 200 pounds. Maybe 175 is kind of the optimal point. And you're putting 200, 300, 400 pounds on those joints. They're going to give out sooner, which means your sustainable well-being will deteriorate sooner. It's not a moral punishment, but there is a center point. There is a center point of sustainable well-being, and you're off course. And the more you're off course of the center point to your well-being, the more unnecessary suffering you are going to experience. And the more unnecessary suffering that you experience, the more suffering you give to other people that would be unnecessary if you weren't carrying it. You think of mania and depression, for example. You've missed the mark, right? You go from mania to depression. You pass through the mark briefly. There's a brief period where but that's not where you're coming to rest. I'm rushing around mania, and doing this and doing that. I've got to get it all done, and then I'm exhausted, right? You've missed the mark, right? You're going here, and then you're going back here. The mark is here. That's what's sustainable, right? But you're missing it. And it's not about you being good or you being bad as a being, as a consciousness. It's about the level of sustainable well-being you are able to accomplish. You are going to accomplish less sustainable well-being if you fail than if you succeed to hit the mark. Now, there's also false targets, right? That's the job of advertisers, right? The job of advertisers is to pretend that the target is over here. That's why advertisers are paid lots of money. The person selling a service or a product wants you to believe that your best, your sustainable well-being, your best shot is buying their product and service. If you can just put all the money you've saved up and all the time and energy that you've created for yourself, and if you would just put all that into a Porsche, that's what life is all about. low to the ground, loud engine, 10 miles to the gallon, that's the pinnacle, right? You've arrived. Sitting there in traffic, but you could go, if it wasn't for all that traffic, you could go hundreds of miles an hour. Except there's a speed limit and there's all that traffic. But if all that would just go away, right? And just hundreds of thousands of dollars into this car, right? That's what it's all about. That's what an advertiser's job is, right? Now, you might have some ideas that spending time with your family, that getting to know yourself, that identifying what is the important goal, that identifying what is important is the most important thing. You might have some ideas about that, but you're unlikely to come up with another Porsche, right? We could buy another Porsche, but if we really think about it, it's unlikely in most people's lives that is the thing. That's the mark, right? Because you have to identify where to aim. What are you aiming for? To know what the most important thing is the most important thing. Because if you get it right, your sustainable well-being will increase as you hit the mark. That means you've got it right. Now, it's never perfect. The person that hits the bullseye is always a millimeter or two or half a millimeter to the left, to the right, to above, to below. It just depends on how fine the measurement is. And you can expand the measurements indefinitely. You always miss the mark by 0.0001%. You always miss it by a little. There is no perfection, but the closer you get to hitting the target, the more your sustainable well-being increases, and you are an innate part of an interconnected ecology. You are not separate from the whole. You are not separate from the one. You are not separate from your family. You are not separate from your cult. You are not separate from the ecology out of which you emerged. You are not separate from divinity. You are not separate from all that is. So as you hit the mark, the ecology of which you are a part thrives, which is why your sin affects other people. If you become an addict, you've missed the mark. Relative to healing and understanding the underlying pain and responding to it so that it dissolves, so that its balance point is restored, right? Because if I miss the mark on my weight and I weigh 400 pounds and my joint pain is 300% louder than if I was 175 pounds or whatever the case may be, whatever the mark is, right? Which is different for different people's bodies, right? If you're taller, longer arms, your mark may be a heavier set point. You can do just as much damage as, by malnourishing. You can have too much sugar, you can have too little sugar. You can have too much salt, you can have too little salt. The point is to hit the mark, to find the area, the center the still point inside the storm, when it takes as little energy as possible for the most amount of sustainable well-being. Now, when you find the mark that takes as little energy as possible for the most amount of sustainable well-being, archetypally this is represented by the Buddha, the middle way, finding the center, caring enough to love and wish compassion on all things, not caring enough to be filled with hate, right? Because if you care so much about broken trust and broken innocence, right, it becomes hatred, becomes helplessness, it becomes despair. But if you dissociate, that's not my problem. There's no compassion, there's no love. It's about finding the middle way that hits the mark, the bullseye. Now, in a car, the faster you move, the faster your four tires spin. The faster your four tires spin, the more important it is that the axle is centered, that the tires are balanced, right? So you go in to have your tires balanced. They're off by 1%, 2%. And so the spinning motor, there's a little wobble in there. And at 70 miles an hour, that wobble increases the vibration, the stress on the metals, on the bolts, increases the stress on the drivers. The faster you go, the more important getting down to a centered wheel becomes. If you put the axle over here, you have an incredibly violent ride. You don't want to be in that car because it's too uncentered. The crime is to be uncentered, to miss the mark. The crime is to have a flawed picture of the mark. As if the most important thing in your sustainable well-being is a lucid empathic bond with your child. And you get swayed from the mark. This is why advertising is a crime. Because an advertiser's job is to distort the biological signals that were designed to serve you towards the mark, right? You think of a beautiful woman, right? The source of all life. Don't think you're going to get any men without women, right? The source of all life, a beautiful woman. A beautiful woman has symmetry, has balance, has proportionality. She hits the mark, right? Faces that are cut down the middle, the people that we're drawn to, right, have symmetrical faces, right? The biology has hit the mark, right? You've got symmetry. Symmetry equals beauty, equals truth, equals goodness. What goodness? What beauty? What truth? It's closer to the mark. It's closer to sustainable well-being, the endless continuum. And so the advertiser's job is to get you to conflate the beautiful woman, the source of all life, with the Porsche. And that's a lie. But we're trained biologically to listen to our body, right? Instinctively, if every time we go to the well and draw water, there's a beautiful woman there, we understand that there's a connection between the well and the beautiful woman. Water is the source of all life. A beautiful woman is the source of all life. We understand that there's a connection. And so we're drawn to go to the well. We're drawn to quench our thirst, to hydrate the body, to reconnect with the ecology of which we are a part. We are 70% water. We need to reconnect with the source of all life, with beauty, with truth, with goodness, right? That's life. You see, life is the bullseye. 99% of everything that has ever been is now dead. 200 million years ago, there were all kinds of plants, all kinds of fungi, all kinds of animals. And the pattern today is 99% different. Those patterns of energy that connected with that world are now extinct. They have changed into new patterns of energy. We are the mark of the entire possibility field of life, the entire possibility field in which everything could be. We are the 1% that is. 99% of what was is now dead, is now extinct, has changed so dramatically we cannot fully recognize it. We are the mark. We are the 1% that is taking the torch of life forward. We are the mark. But if we fail to survive, to create security in that survival, to experience love and belonging, we fail the emotional mark of love and belonging. You see, love and belonging supports survival at a factor of 100, right? Take love and belonging out of the equation, right? So you're a human animal without love and without belonging. You are not loved, you do not love, you do not belong. You are alone. The world is vast relative to one human body. And without love and without belonging, the world is a terrifying place. That's no problem. You have a reptilian brain. Your reptilian brain is designed to survive sociopathic energy, a sociopathic environment. In a sociopathic environment, if something is bigger than you, it uses you, it feeds on you, it exploits you for its benefit. If something is smaller than you, it runs from you because you will use it, you will exploit it. Little children that run from highly abusive parents, they understand that those giants are going to feed on something that that child has. Feed on their joy, feed on their fear, feed on their bodies. They're going to be used by reptiles in human form, giant reptiles relative to the small shape of a child. Now, how efficient is human life in a reptilian template of fear, lies, betrayal, distrust, cruelty, betrayal? How efficient is that life, right? Is that human life going to make it to the next level, right? Relative to all the other patterns of life. Remember, 1 billion years ago, 99% of what was is now extinct or radically different. We're the 1%, which means that in another billion years, 99% of what is alive today will have missed the mark. 99% of what is alive today will have either iterated and changed into a new and somewhat unrecognizable form, or it will be consumed, it will be dead, and replaced with a form that is more intelligent. What does intelligence mean? Intelligence is the measurement of efficiency. We all want sustainable well-being. We all want to avoid chronic and unnecessary suffering. We want it because it's built into life. It is biological. How do we know that we want to feel better and avoid feeling worse? Because our body has been programmed. When we take a scoop of ice cream, our body says, yes, that feels good. I want more. And when we take a nail and push it into our skin, our body says, no, you're missing the mark. You're committing a crime. You're deviating. You're missing the mark. I don't want to be filled with rusty holes in my body. Something's not right here. The body will tell us. Our heart will tell us we don't want to be alone. We want to be loved. Why? Because love is closer to the mark. Love is closer to survival. Love is closer to security of survival. Love is closer to competence. Just imagine if parents just ate their children. Fresh meat. Why go out hunting? Why change the diaper? Why give them an education? That's work. We're reptiles. We're sociopaths. The reptilian paradigm, the reptilian program is feed on that which is small and helpless and can't defend itself, and run from that which is bigger and is likely to survive a conflict, and freeze to conserve energy when neither of those options are clearly going to be successful. If you start running and are chased by a polar bear, not going to happen. 40 miles an hour, 15 miles an hour. Running is not a good idea if you encounter a polar bear. Fighting, not a good idea. I mean, maybe if you have a machine gun, good idea. If it gets too close, right? But just you, 3 tons of weight, huge claws, 150 pounds, not a good idea. So if you can't run and you can't fight, you freeze. just going to stay right here, and hopefully he's going to lose interest. Maybe I'll curl up into a ball. Just let him bat me around or walk off. I'm not going to run. I'm not going to fight. But I'm afraid. I'm going to conserve energy. I'm not going to be a threat. I'm not going to trigger the fight mechanism in a polar bear. Because the ancient brain is looking for, it's got a code, right? If I'm bigger than them, they should run. So they're running, that means I'm bigger. So I should chase and kill and feed. Or if they're fighting me, maybe they're bigger than me. Sometimes if you fight, even if you're going to lose, just the biological coding is such that they shouldn't be fighting me at their size. Maybe they have a secret weapon, so I'm going to back up precisely because they're fighting me. Maybe I don't get something. So sometimes bluffing works. But we're in a fight, flight, freeze paradigm of reptilian behavior. And the question is, do you get libraries from reptilian behavior? No. Why would you create knowledge to inform your enemy? Why would you record it in a book? You'd learn the knowledge and then you wouldn't tell anyone. You wouldn't write it down because then your enemy might become more informed in a reptilian paradigm. You don't get libraries. Your employees are going to exploit you, so you don't want them in a reptilian paradigm. And if you do, you got to keep an eye on them. You don't raise children except for usury, enslavement. Your job is to obey your parents and do this and work the farm and do that, and we don't want to hear what you have to say. Shut up. You can enslave your children when you have them. For now, do as you're told. You don't have children. You don't invest in a better world. And that means life misses the mark. Because if there's love and belonging, you have the opposite behavior. When you have love and belonging by an adult, you create trust. And trust hits the mark. Because if you're not trustworthy, you don't get trust. And if you are trustworthy, and you secure trust, and you fulfill that trust, you get empathy. You get more love. And the virus of trust and trustworthiness spreads. Now, if the virus of trust and trustworthiness spreads, the virus of empathy, the virus of love and belonging spreads with it. The virus of gratitude is a byproduct of trustworthiness leading to trust and trust fulfilled. What are people trusting? What are people trusting when they trust you, when they trust their government, when they trust anyone? What are people trusting? They are trusting that you will use your influence to create a world, to create an environment, to create a relationship that is better for them. And what does better mean? It means closer to the mark. That their energy expenditure will be reduced and their sustainable well-being will be increased because of your influence. A reptile doesn't help a struggling business trying to keep its employees afloat. A reptile shorts the stock, destroys a town, and takes more because it can. 10,000 people in a town, another 10, 20, 30% for the shareholders who don't need it. Statistically, the shareholders in a hedge fund need money the least, and they take it the most. They use the most sociopathic methods to transfer energy from the least to the people who don't need it the most. It takes a reptile, right? When Bill Gates shorts Tesla, a car company aiming to take on a Herculean task of transforming the grid to electricity. When Bill Gates shorts Tesla, he is a reptile feeding on the hopes, the dreams, and the hard work of people changing the planet. You see, and it's not that simple. It's not that simple. We all have a reptilian brain. When Bill Gates gives money to charity, it can be a mixture of things. The reptile can calculate popularity, public opinion. There's a calculating element in the reptile. I can look good. And there can also be genuine empathy, genuine care. But while you are genuinely caring, you do not seek to make money by depressing the fortunes of people working their ass off to clear up the air in our cities, among other things. 4 million deaths to smog, and other complications because of dirtier cities. An entire industry making money by polluting our cities when cleaner energy and better options are available. When you bet against what is good, beautiful, and true, it is to regress into a reptilian state. I can feed off of this. There's an easy bit of food here. I can trade this, I can short this, I can do this, and I can take half of my winnings and donate it to charity in a very public way. But, Bill Gates wasn't proud of shorting Tesla, so he avoided it for several years. I don't talk about that. I just talk about the things I'm proud of. Bill Gates destroys trust when he acts reptilian, when he undermines the efforts of hard-working people trying to hit the mark, move closer to the target. In this case, the target, let's target 1 million deaths to smog rather than 4 million. You're moving quite, you're out here. You could target this as the first step. Let's go from 4 million deaths to 1 million. We're getting closer to the mark. But how about we target that other human beings don't die because of the technology of other human beings? That when we do stuff that kills other people, we've missed the mark. Relative to creating trust through being trustworthy, such that they are not our enemy. Because collaboration and synergy, we're talking 10 to 1,000x. You see, you don't get libraries without trustworthiness, without generosity, without love and belonging. You don't get free apps. You don't get Wikipedia. You don't get a certain amount of government. If you don't trust government at all, you don't vote to form one. And so you have anarchy. You have feudalism. I don't trust anyone. So I'm going to shoot anyone who comes onto my territory, my land. Why? Because I can, because I've got a gun. I don't participate in this. I don't trust it, right? But trust and trustworthiness go hand in hand, right? It is our biological nature to trust what feeds us, what nourishes us, which is why when a parent sacrifices some of their food, some of their time, some of their energy out of love and belonging to nourish their child, a parent makes that child sacred, but a parent also makes the race sacred, closer to the mark. Why? Because a species run on the operating system of trust based on trustworthiness in a paradigm of mutual empathy and understanding is a species that makes it through the next billion years. On this planet, on another. You see, why should we invest money in the stock market if we do not trust the CEOs of the companies running our investment to act in our best interest? Why would we invest our money, our stored energy, into a company that we expected to steal our money and act in the interest of a few people at the top of the company, and not in the interest of the country, and not in the interest of the shareholders, and not in the interest of the employees? Why would we give money to that? We wouldn't. All energy is extended voluntarily on the basis of trust. And the trust, the bet is that we'll get back more than we gave. And the reality is that we will, if we're dealing with love and belonging. The amount of wealth that is existent on the planet today is largely a function of trust, which is largely a function of trustworthiness. Trust that people will do the best for their families. Trust that people will do the best for their country. Trust that people will have enlightened self-interest, which means the interest of everyone else, right? When you have enlightened self-interest, when you take care of your body, when you take care of your mind, when you take care of your heart, when you take care of your family, the world will be a better place because you are in it in a vital, healthy state than if you die in an unhealthy state. And those around you die, right? In an interconnected body, which is what a world of empathy is, you have synergies that are impossible to justify, to create, in a reptilian environment. In a reptilian environment, you don't pay taxes so that other people can benefit from those taxes. You don't do it because you don't want them to get ahead because you're afraid of them. Because in a reptilian environment, the stronger other people get, the quicker they will kill you, the quicker they will feed on you. And in the reptilian elements of government, in the reptilian elements of family, in the reptilian elements of capitalism, that is exactly what happens, right? If you give Microsoft more money, it will hire more attorneys to buy out or wipe out the competition because it can and because it does in a reptilian paradigm. In a reptilian paradigm, you don't want to see the other companies in your industry doing well. And they don't want to see you doing well either. But in an empathic paradigm, the focus is on making the pie bigger rather than carving up scraps and getting a bigger piece. The amount of wealth that is created through synergy, which requires trust, which requires trustworthiness, which requires sacrifice and empathy. The amount of wealth that is created with synergy is 1,000 times more. The pie grows 1,000 times relative to the size of the pie created with a reptilian operating system. A reptile sometimes eats her own young. A reptile doesn't nurture a being into existence. A snake slithers off. Right? It's the reptilian operating system. You see, and snakes do not have libraries. Snakes do not have schools. Snakes do not have child labor laws. Snakes do not have empathy. Snakes will never take the Earth and make it multiplanetary. Snakes cannot have sex with other planets because it requires too much cooperation. You see, there's an interesting mathematics around becoming a spacefaring civilization. It requires so much cooperation of so many people over such a long period of time to get a single ton of energy, of information, of energy in a form, in a formation, from this planet to another planet, that it's hard to imagine that happening without empathy, without trust, based on trustworthiness. It's not an accident that Elon Musk is the single greatest probability field for our species to become multiplanetary. It's not an accident because he doesn't lie, because he thinks about the issues of humanity, because he serves his idea of beauty, truth, and goodness for the planet and for the species. because he'd rather lose every dime of his money working to create cleaner air, safer cars, sustainable energy, and liberate us from the terror of the unknown asteroid. It is an absolute certainty that in the next billion years, maybe next year, maybe next year, maybe 1,000 years, maybe 1,000,000 years, maybe 10 million years, maybe 100 million years, it is an absolute certainty that in the next 100 million years, a species-dissolving asteroid is going to collide with this planet. And we don't know when. And Elon doesn't know when either. But if you love, if you take ownership, if you care about this planet, its life forms, if you want to have sex with other planets, which means that some of the patterns of energy in this planet touch, change, interact with, and synergize with patterns of energy on other planets, we have got to do something incredibly difficult. Break through gravity to get energy in formation to other bodies of matter in the solar system, exponentially increasing the probability field that the patterns on this planet will survive that asteroid event. Now, in a reptilian environment, such an endeavor gets almost no energy. If we were complete reptiles, no one would have bet on Tesla. No one would have bet on SpaceX. And the short positions of the reptilian brain, which became enormous with Tesla. Tesla was the single most shorted stock in the entire world for the audacity of caring about people in a way that often fails. The reptiles were betting on failure, caring about the planet, caring about the species doesn't always work, doesn't work most of the time. Feeding on that works if you're a reptile. Extracting the energy when it fails and precipitating the failure returns yields for the people who need it the least from the entire probability field of the species. Reptilian thinking works, particularly if you've got a PR department, particularly if you keep secrets, particularly if you're much bigger than the adversaries, particularly if you can buy your government, particularly if you can buy the best attorneys. If the best attorney will take the highest fee, regardless of whether they believe it's right or not. What does right mean? It's another word for the mark. It's right. What does it mean to be right, to be true when you're a framing contractor of the house? It means that you have picked the kind of wood and put in the kind of screws, the kind of nails, the kind of sheeting in the right pattern that will withstand the 100-year storm. That's what it means to be true. This wall is true. It's right. I've hit the mark. And because I've hit the mark, the family who lives in this home will not be killed by my work. It's good. It's true. It's beautiful. Someone who does good work, who does right work, who does beautiful work, knows that they're all the same. Knows that you've hit the mark. And empathic human beings don't destroy and undermine those people. Reptiles do, if they can make a quick buck. Because a reptile, by definition, is not thinking about other people. That would be empathic. A reptile is sociopathic. They are disconnected from the people they influence. And because of that disconnection, they don't feel the pain that they cause to everyone, including their latent humanity. Because a reptile in human form is an unblossomed flower, meaning maybe the first blossom opened and the breeze was too cold. It was an early blooming of humanity and innocence in that child. Betrayal, cold, it was followed by frost. The flowers died. And that child felt absolute excruciating horror as everything good in them, everything beautiful, died, was fed on, was corrupted, was used, was attacked by the reptiles around it, consciously or unconsciously. So they descended back into a reptilian state. And as a reptile, feeling nothing, able to manipulate, able to see where and how to exploit vulnerabilities in the system, the reptile began to grow and benefit from reptilian behavior where it was harmed as a human being. Now you have a more and more competent reptile navigating the system, figuring out how to play the hand to get the most energy from other people that is possible with the least amount of effort, how to protect the pattern of their life. And this is how the virus of reptilian behavior spreads, because they will invariably betray, shame, humiliate, terrorize. More than 10 people in their life with their protocols, with their bullying, with their cruelty. And some of those will go on to become reptiles of their own, foregoing the human potential, foregoing the spiritual potential in each human being, in order to win at an easier game for less reward. It's a smaller pie playing reptilian. You never contribute to it. You make it smaller, but you may still get a bigger piece of the smaller pie as long as you don't mind hiring endless bodyguards, attorneys, and a small army to fight off the increasing number of people who hate you for feeding on their vulnerability because you have mass. The law of mass in a reptilian paradigm means that the bigger takes from the smaller because they can. The law of empathy says that the bigger protects and supports the smaller because they have empathy, because they understand what it's like to be smaller. And that's the only way you get gratitude. Reptiles don't have gratitude. They have disdain, they have scorn, they have hate, they have rage, they have viciousness. They don't have gratitude because you cannot be grateful and be a reptile. Reptiles cannot feel grateful. By definition, as you move into gratitude, you are moving into humanity, into the human regions of the brain with the human operating system. You're moving into the transcendent brain that transcends our human limited identity. We are more than our bodies. It's not that our bodies are unimportant, but we're also more than our bodies. We're more than what we perceive with our five senses. We are interconnected with all of it. There is a thread that connects everything to everything else, which is why a spiritual being will not harm another to benefit their ego. The ego is the identity, the pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that the ego says is me versus everyone else. The spiritual being is the one aware of the connection between all things. It's the largest awareness, the largest amount of consciousness, and it dictates. It's not a discipline. You don't say, oh, I shouldn't hate that person because I'm a spiritual being. That's a thought. If your transcendent brain is aware, you see, you feel, you know your connection with all things. And so you do not cut off your own arm because it hurts, not because it's the moral thing to do. You don't have ideas about values. You have awareness of connection. Now, the brain, the operating system that has the most potential on this planet, is the operating system that is aware of the interconnectedness of all things. If we want our planet to have orgasmic intercourse, relationships, relays of energy, synergies with other planets that have different patterns of energy, that are capable of facilitating patterns of intelligence, patterns of life that our planet is incapable of doing, and vice versa. That's what sex is. When two people with different systems of energy come together with enough trust and trustworthiness to give birth to a new life form, when they come together with enough synergy, with enough trust, and a new life form is born, that child has a bigger possibility field than either of its parents. The life forms that are capable, when there is a transfer of energy between the various planets, is greater than the possibility field, than the probability field of only one planet in isolation, right? If we can get a self-sustaining colony on Mars that could survive a species wipeout on Earth, the probability field, the possibility field of the universe is bigger than if we do not. The possibility field, the probability field of our species is bigger than if we do not. Right? And it starts by increasing the possibility field, which is neutral, and then increasing the probability field, which is neutral, and then increasing the actuality field with more options to choose from. When you expand the possibility field, you expand the pie. You expand the pie when you expand the possibility field. So anyone who supports the species in expanding the possibility field is serving the size of the pie. Right? Because there's two ways to become wealthy. One is to create so much pie that everyone can have a large slice. You see, and when we go off planet, there is enough energy in the universe for every single one of us to have as big a piece of the pie as we are able and willing to create. It's not limited by the possibility field. It's limited to our competence. And the fastest path to competence is to identify with all life, with the species. The slowest path to competence is to view everything and everyone as our enemy, to withhold opportunity. You could have such a great life if you got this degree. You could have such a great life if you knew this knowledge, if you were able to travel to this place. But I don't want you to have a great life if I'm not going to get what I want. You're not getting it either. And if I do get what I want, why should I care about you? Right? The reptilian brain fights for a smaller and smaller pie that disintegrates with anarchy, with distrust, with less, right? Because why would a worker go to work if they couldn't trust their employer to pay them? They wouldn't. And suddenly we go hungry. Why would someone learn something if their government is going to block their company? They wouldn't, right? Small business is declining in the US as bureaucracy rises. You have a good idea. Well, just apply for this permit, apply for this license, do this, pass this, do this, and then we'll let you make money for us. Want to build a home for your family? Just pass 1,000 codes, fit into this zoning, bid into this. We'll let you provide a roof for your family. So homelessness rises, bureaucracy rises, home prices, the cost it takes to legally thread through all that maze. It's not freedom. It's burdens. It's slowing you down. It's taking your energy to feed the cancer, the bureaucracy, so that it can put more hurdles and more burdens and tax you even more, not to feed life, not to feed creativity, to feed itself, right? That's what a cancer does. It doesn't potentiate the body. It feeds on the body. To hit the mark, to hit the bullseye, is to take the most important idea and develop feelings of love, enthusiasm, filled with God, filled with goddess, filled with divinity, enthused, filled with life. Our bodies want to live. Our hearts want to feel. It feels good to trust people who are trustworthy, right? So the big challenge for humanity is to become trustworthy to ourselves, to our family, to one another. That's the crisis. We have survived. Most of us have some security in that survival. But if we cannot trust and be trustworthy, that security is tenuous when someone could betray us if we gave them the chance, right? I built all this up and then I forgot to lock the door. It's not worth it. I'm not going to build it up because you are not trustworthy. And so the pie is smaller. Trust expands the pie. Trustworthiness expands trust. Trustworthiness expands the pie because it creates the foundation for gratitude, for empathy, for love. You see, and we do all want to feel sustainably better and avoid feeling chronically worse. We do. It's self-evident. We want it because it feels good. We want to feel sustainably better. We're all on that path, trying to figure out what life has organized. Because life has created a target that if we hit that target, life blossoms. And when life blossoms and when we hit that target, we feel ecstatic. We feel transcendent. We feel grateful. We feel connected to all things. We feel home. We have arrived home. Life has created that target, and our biology, our feelings, our sensations are guiding us home. And it feels good to love and to have that love honored. And it feels good to be loved and to live up and honor that love. It feels better to be loved and live up to that love than to betray it. And it feels better to love and have that love lived up to than to betray it. And that love will be betrayed when there is not the competency necessary to create the abundance necessary. That all of our needs can be fulfilled if we want them to. When there is a small pie and 1 million people who are hungry, there will be betrayal. There will be lies. Because the small pie is a mirror of competence, or in this case, incompetence, right? When there's so much energy, so much land, so much fertilizer, so much light, when there's so much energy out there, why on earth is there only one pie for 1 million people? Why aren't there 10 million pies? Because when you have 10 pies for every person, If someone says, can I have a piece of your pie? Sure. Please, I can't eat all this, right? There's no pain when you got 10 pies and only want a few slices. Abundant people, emotionally, mentally, physically abundant people, are generous people, are empathic people, are trustworthy people. And trustworthy people create trust. And trust leads to gratitude, leads to synergy, leads to love, leads to flow. Put a lock on the door to block flow because you don't trust other people, because other people are not trustworthy. So now everyone needs a lock. And that lock, that energy, could have been spent making pies and making bigger pies. Right? But it's a collective intelligence. It's when does the collective reach the point where it's so dumb to put a lock on? Because now I have to unlock and unlock my door with all these lovely people around me. It's just silly. Let's donate the lock to the forge. Let's make art. You see, you cannot do that with scarcity. And there will be scarcity when there is not the trustworthiness needed to create trust. It's a chicken and egg dynamic, right? You cannot create intelligence if you are stupid. I'm too stupid to be empathic, to be trustworthy, to have trust. So I create a small pie that seems to then justify, see, they got the bigger pie, they cheated. I need to cheat, so I get some pie too, because it's a small pie. And look, little Jenny, she whined. She said, oh, Daddy, can I have a piece of pie? And he gave her a pie. And I said, could I have some pie? And he says, no, see, I've got to whine. I've got to manipulate. And maybe I should cut my elbow, right? And then do this and do this. Because Dad's not competent enough to create enough pie. And Dad's not competent enough to reward strength. He rewards weakness and victimhood. So I've got to become less so that I can get more. Because it's not fair. This is not enough for me, right? That's how we learn. That's how we get stuck. I've got to be the victim. I've got to be the bully. The bully got it more, right? I said, could I have some? No. And I said, I will hit you unless you give me your pie. And they still said no, so I hit them, and then they gave me the pie. Now I've got the solution, right? I just have to hit people enough, and I'll get what I want. Right? That doesn't evolve into something more unless we are competent enough to create more pie and competent enough to take an interest, to share the wealth. That's what Wikipedia is, sharing the wealth. We know more than gods today because of Wikipedia, right? 3,000 years ago, what we know today is more than people could have imagined to ask. That's more than God's. But we didn't create it with, I'm not sharing my knowledge and I'm not sharing my knowledge. We created an abundance of knowledge. with generosity, right? And an empathic, intelligent culture will feed Wikipedia, will give them a $10 tip when they ask to keep it alive. Because that's how you get a bigger pie, is to serve and to honor those giving their lives, their time, their heart, their dreams, to bless the world with knowledge.